Also, Sarah, that one, you've watched, how many episodes of season 7 have you watched?
We just watched the first one.
Okay, Rupert is the one that steals the shoes from the other team.
Oh, that's Rupert.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna like this season. Okay, if his name wasn't Rupert, it would probably be a lot less funny.
But also, when you see him, you're like, oh, that's a Rupert. It's like this big, burly, like Jack Black. The kids all say that he looks like Jack Black.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And he wears this tie-dye tank top.
But he steals people's shoes.
Well, he's a pirate. Not actually, but this season is all, it's a pirate. It's why the teams are.
But I didn't know they were actual pirates.
I mean, that's what all of the challenges are. And then with each reward challenge, one person gets to go and steal an item from the other camp. It's all, and then they have like their buried treasure. And
They're pirates.
the team names are, what are they? Drake and...
Like actual pirates.
Yes.
Oh, wait, yeah, I think they said it.
Yes, they did.
I can't remember. I did fall asleep.
Yes,
12 minutes into that episode.
Well, of course they said the team names on the first episode.
Okay. Welcome to the Fragile Podcast, where we are learning to embrace our humanity. I'm April.
I'm Jessica. I always forget that part.
You always forget your
that
name?
you're Jessica?
No, then I have to say it.
Do you want, maybe you want to be Sarah today and I'll be Jessica?
Well, you guys already know.
Our names?
Yeah. That's why I forget I have to say it.
Oh, because we know each other's
names.
names. Also, this is Sarah.
Yeah, that's
say
me.
hers.
I'm Sarah.
And today we are doing the second installment of a new series. Since the first episode was so enthusiastically, what is that, accepted? But not that word.
Appreciated?
Something. Received?
Received.
That one.
Received.
So, accepted?
Which actually we don't have any idea because that first one has not typically.
Don't share how the sausage is made.
This moment,
just
I think it's
pretend.
funny.
You're ruining
You think
the
it's
magic.
funny? Yeah. So we're assuming that the first one was. Do you need help there? We're assuming that the other one was super enthusiastically received, and so we were like, well, we should just keep going.
Mm-hmm. And by keep going, we're talking about this series of About Us.
All about us.
So the first one, if you missed it, was about our reality TV obsessions.
This is going to be very drastically different.
This one, we're taking a hard turn. But we've gotten several questions about our personal, individual histories with being in ministry or church history. And so we're going to come on here and answer those and just give a little bit more information about ourselves and our experience in ministry. And it's not all rainbows and unicorns.
No, I'm actually nervous about this episode. I'm nervous, but I want to share. I think it's important, but I'm nervous. Yeah. I do want to say also, our experiences in ministry involve us all also leaving ministry. And part of that involves other people's stories. It has to. My goal is to keep this about my own story. And although it will involve other people, number one, I'm not going to say anybody's name, but also the goal is not to paint them in a bad light. But in some cases, they've painted themselves already that way, and there's just no way around it.
Can't paint them with a different color.
So I just want to make it clear that my goal here is just to share about me. And the unfortunate byproduct of that is that it will involve other people. Okay, I got that out of the way. No,
cool. Same.
Same.
Disclaimer for all of us.
We can just have one of those running banners across the bottom of the screen if you're watching it, on the breaking news.
Breaking news. Sarah, Jessica, April, leave ministry.
Not ticker tape. Yeah.
A ticker?
That's what ticker? Isn't it? What is it called? The thing that runs across the bottom?
Why would it be a ticker?
I think it's ticker tape.
It just is.
What is a ticker?
It's like on Wall Street.
I know what it is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I generally pretend.
I say let's stick with ticker because that's just fun to say.
For those that are possibly listening and maybe more unfamiliar with church culture, welcome. Glad you're here. This is going to be
you won't be so unfamiliar.
But when we're saying full-time ministry or talking about being in ministry, what are we talking about?
Being paid, so for us, the soul of our income came from the job that we did within the church. And that's what we would consider full-time ministry.
So when I say ministry, being in ministry full time,
That was
like,
their job.
Being a pastor,
that you worked at a church.
or like, you worked at a church and that was your sole source of income. That was your job.
So how did you all get into ministry?
I married somebody who was in ministry. And that's how I got into it. But actually, now that I think about it, I started working for the church when I was a teenager, as like an internship. It was something that I had actually wanted to do growing up. I wanted to be married to somebody in ministry, thinking that I could not go into ministry on my own.
Well, also, side note, the idea of being in ministry was really, there was a lot of pressure put on teenagers that grew up in the church to go to Bible college, which were colleges specifically designed to train people to go work in churches as like a pastor or teacher or whatever. And there was a lot of pressure on teens to like find God's will for your life, and like, coincidentally, God's will typically had to have something to do with going to Bible college
and being
going into ministry.
And if you were a girl, marrying somebody in ministry because you couldn't do that on your own.
Yeah.
So there's that side note.
So that's what I wanted to do as a teenager. Big life goals. So I married somebody as a teenager.
You did. Wait, how old were you when you got married?
19.
Same.
Oh, I hate this already. So yeah, that's my story.
That's how you got into ministry.
That is how I got into ministry.
And the ministry you were in was in Fresno, California.
Yes.
That's where we
mine's
grew
boring.
up. Was in Fresno.
Well, you can do the,
Star,
This
what about
is
you?
all brown.
yeah, you can do the boring one.
Fresno's not over here.
I think it was the same. It was like a glory position that was like, the best kids go into the ministry.
Very little glory.
Like,
I mean, spoiler alert.
spoiler
It
alert.
was not glorious.
Cue narrator.
Falsely advertised.
So it was just kind of like the kids with the most potential or whatever. So I was definitely, this is going to be a weird thing to say right after that, but I was steered that way. Because, well, it doesn't matter. But anyway, I was steered that way. So I went to Bible college. I met somebody who had only ever considered being in the full-time ministry position and ended up marrying him. And so we were in ministry together. So just kind of like there was no...
Just wasn't a question.
Correct.
So what kept you there?
Said person.
Said ideas, said pressure.
You mean your husband?
yeah.
Being married to your husband kept you there?
Yeah.
Like you would have left if...
Oh, I would have left probably 10 years ago.
Why?
When mom and was it when mom and dad left the church or they moved? Something why can I not remember
So
this?
the church that Sarah was on staff at, when Sarah and I were older, we're numbers 8 and 9 in the lineup of 9 children. April is the oldest. And when we were late in high school, our parents switched churches to this church in Fresno. And then my husband and I left and moved here to Yuma, but Sarah and our parents stayed there. And that's where Sarah and her husband were on staff at. But after...
It was only like 6 months after you guys
not very long
moved.
after. That's right, because they switched churches to Summer and Ricky's, another church in the area our parents switched to.
Yeah, after they left, some things happened, some things got really weird, and I wanted out, but was told that was not an option.
Told by your husband?
Pastor, and then my husband.
Did you actually voice your concerns and say I want out?
Yeah.
Or maybe just no?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's clear.
Oh, good thing we had that disclaimer at the beginning.
Also, how to spot a red flag.
Actually, I don't know if I should say this, but it was after a conversation with you guys, I think. We
Bad
had gone-
influences.
That's what it was. And a lot of things had gotten said during that time. A lot of rumors and lies and
About us.
about you guys.
Wow.
And so when I asked about those things, I was told that you guys were the ones lying, and I should be very careful about what I listen to, and lots of things. So we stayed.
Naturally. So we stayed. Star, what about you? What kept you in ministry?
Well, I loved it for. Okay, so let me start over. The goal for John was always to go into full-time evangelism. So at the beginning, so that's where you travel. You're an itinerant preacher, like think in the old days of like the what did they call them? The circuit riding preachers.
Oh, yeah.
So you just go around. We went around the country and we went around the world, just preaching wherever churches would invite you to come. Mostly what would be called revival meetings, which is like a multi-day meeting that he would go and he would speak every night. That was always the goal. Since probably a few days after I met him, I knew that was his goal. And so at the beginning of ministry, what kept me in was that goal, getting to that goal. And then while we did that, I loved it. But then we decided instead to stop traveling and to take a church that offered a position, and that was here in Yuma. And that was 16 years ago. And we've been here ever since. What kept me here at the beginning was probably a sense of excitement about something new. And the belief that I convinced myself of that this is what we were designed by God to do.
I know that well.
I think up until probably 6 or 8 years ago, what kept me in it was John, because I was definitely disillusioned I was becoming more and more disillusioned with not our specific church, but the greater church culture that we were part of. And I would voice my frustrations to John often. In fact, in 2020, I think I finally just came right out and said, I'm not doing it anymore. I can't spin my wheels. I can't keep doing this. I just can't do it. Then he had his health issues, mental breakdown issue. Much later, it wasn't a result of my telling him I can't do that anymore. But
If you're not familiar with that, you can go back and listen to the anxiety episode.
Mm-hmm. And you can hear that whole story. But anyway, so then we took a sabbatical. Actually, it wasn't 3, it was 2 months sabbatical. And kind of came back with a renewed sense of purpose, I guess. And that purpose, and I felt we were more aligned in our sense of purpose at that
You
point.
and him?
Yeah, John and I. We were both at that point because of everything in 2020, both of us disillusioned with the greater church culture. And I felt like now we were together. He was seeing things that I had been learning about and seeing. Now he was seeing those same things, and it felt like, okay, I have a partner in this, so I'm willing to stay, and let's try to recover, I guess, the more ancient ways of scripture and purpose, and instead of the like American ways. And in philosophy and that kind of stuff. And so that kept me going then for a little longer. But that didn't
last very long.
Yes, it didn't last
While
forever.
you were in ministry for any time, what were some of the good experience that you had? Well,
I feel like I need to answer the previous question more.
Oh, okay.
Then,
did I skip you?
No.
No. 'Cause the question was what kept you in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I went through like seasons of like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be in this. And after mom and dad left, that was definitely a season. But then it would just kind of like go up and down, like something would happen. And then I would like revert back to that. Like, I don't want to be in this. But it was just like a sense of like, no, this is what we're supposed to do. This is what my husband wants to do. So as a supportive wife, I'm going to support him in this.
As a submissive wife.
Yes. Overrated. And then after our pastor resigned in not stellar circumstances,
Not stellar, biggest understatement of the.
Things
I don't
were
know. Do I
not
need to
stellar. I don't think
Do I need to share more?
so. No.
Anyways, like a huge blowout mess. And we felt like we've got to be the ones to come in and clean this up. We have to be here for the church. But even like a few years before that blowout, Nick and I both he had finally started seeing some things that I was even questioning. But ours was mostly with the pastor. It wasn't with the church or like the system of the church yet. It was just, we had started noticing some things. There were red flags that we were seeing. We were just thinking differently about things and rethinking what we thought of church. And it was not aligning with where the pastor was at the time or where he was headed. Yeah. And then after a couple of years of that, like we just started noticing some things, like we knew something was going on and we just couldn't quite put our finger on it.
Something going on with
within the staff, mostly with the pastor, but within the staff. And like we would ask very specific questions, and at the time we didn't know it, but we were lied to.
I think you can say more. It's all sounds like you're trying to be very ambiguous. I think you can say. You don't have to say like names or anything like that, but you can say what was actually going on.
Okay, the youth pastor and the pastor's wife were having an affair while the pastor was also living basically a double life and very sexually immoral, what I would even say now wrong. Any more specific than that?
No,
there was lots of cover up about it. You guys were lied to about it.
Yeah, we were lied to. Like even when like trying to like ask specific questions, like we knew that
they were gaslighted.
Yes, and we knew they were having, the pastor and his wife were having some marital problems, and we just thought maybe you guys just need to take some time off, just focus on your family for a little bit. Like it'll be fine. The church will support you. Like just take time off, take a sabbatical or something. And so when everything came out that all of this was actually going on, we felt like, okay, the church just lost pastor because they all just left. The pastor, the youth pastor, they all just took off and like didn't say anything, did not tell the church anything. The pastor told the deacons that I just feel like the Lord is calling me in a different direction, so I'm just going to step down. Didn't say anything about what was actually happening. So we felt like we needed to be the ones to go reveal the truth, to call out the sin, to come in and clean up the mess and be there for the church, because we knew like obviously the church is going to be hurt by this. All of a sudden their pastor is leaving behind this big mess. So I think that idea of like we've got to be the ones to come in and save the day kept us in ministry a little bit longer, not very long though. And so I think it was just more like seasons for me. Like I started to see things, but then like it was just like, no, this is our calling. This is what it means to be a Christian. You just suffer through things. You suffer for the sake of the gospel. Until it was too much suffering. And I said, I'm done with this.
Your body kind of said,
you're
done.
That it was really for Nick and I both. Our body, we just got to be very, very unhealthy and stressed, and we had to get out. Yeah, for the sake of our own health.
So, was there ever any good?
Oh, is that the question? Yeah, for me, sure, of course there was. We got to travel the country. We got to travel the world. We one of my favorite things in life, and probably why I was drawn to the idea of ministry in the first place, is seeing people's potential realized and like helping with that. And that's a huge part of ministry. I love to teach, and I was able to teach a lot, only to girls, but I was still able to teach girls. And I love that. So there were, I would say, friendships that were made that changed me for the better, for sure. During all those years, I mean, it's 25 years of my life, you know, so, plus all the lessons that you learn, and, yeah, there was a lot of good, 100%.
Good. Love that for you.
I do love that for you. I don't know if there's as much good for me, but I love that for you. But I think like helping people, I really, really enjoyed helping people and counseling people. That was probably one of my favorite parts. Nick and I both loved doing it. We love doing it together. We love doing it individually because, of course, I could only do it with ladies and he could only do it with men.
Of course.
But I really, really liked that part of ministry. And I think like being around people so much, probably because I am so extroverted, we always had people at our house, or we were always getting together with people. And I did like that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Good. What were some of the harder experiences?
Well,
how long is this podcast?
And this might naturally lead into, eventually we're going to get to like what made you both leave. So maybe those go hand in hand. But aside from, if we can avoid like what made you leave, because we'll get to that, what were just some of the general harder experiences that maybe other people also experience in ministry?
I think the way full-time ministry is structured it's a flawed structure. Mm-hmm. And so because of that structure comes many unavoidable difficulties. There are expectations put on you, on your kids. There are expectations put on your kids. You will be constantly evaluated and, or we could say gossiped about. I'll just use the word evaluated, but in private conversations. Mm-hmm. No matter what you do, people are going to be constantly evaluating you and what you said and what you did and what you wore and where you sat in church and where you didn't sit in church and what your kids did. And people are often talking about you in judgment. And you know what's happening. Because generally those conversations end up getting back to you. Even though people think they don't, they do. They end up getting back to you. And you are still expected the next Sunday to pretend like nothing happened and you're all fine and you love everybody and you don't have weird feelings about the fact that these people have been saying this stuff about you. And that's all part of the system that I think was very difficult. Also, another huge one for us, I don't know if I could say this for everybody, but for us, and again, this is a structural thing, I think also, is that you don't have friends. Mm-hmm. Not real friends. No matter how you try to be yourself, and which is, we always tried to be ourselves. Mm-hmm. We were not ever pretenders. But no matter how much you try, the system will not allow for you to be it will not allow for the people to be friends with you. They will always look at you differently. Mm-hmm. And then also it is difficult to be friends. You know, friends involves trust, and it's difficult to be friends with people that you know are doing this constant evaluation of you and your family behind the scenes. So that, to me, those would be probably the more difficult parts.
Yeah, I would have said the same thing. Like, it just is a very lonely line of work because you cannot have deep relationships. I think some of the things that were harder for me are probably specific to my situation. But I think like some of it was like having very, very specific expectations put on us, not necessarily by the people in the church, but by the pastor.
Yeah, because your situations are different because you, yes. John, was the pastor.
Yes.
And for you, Sarah, you were on staff beneath the pastor. And a pastor who was, to be honest, because I worked at the same church for while we were in Fresno, and he was very controlling.
Yeah,
and
he was.
without trying to be slanderous, it is just that those are the facts.
They're the facts.
Situation.
Mhm, they're the
Yeah,
So there were unrealistic expectations
to the point where we were told what we could wear to church on a Sunday morning, the neighborhood that we could buy our house in and live in, the type of car that we had to drive, even how like a healthy lifestyle, like very, very specific, very specifically on who we could talk to and what we could talk to them about.
I never experienced anything like that. So our stories are very different in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, like being told like, these are the people you can talk to and these are the people you can be vulnerable with, was very hard for me, because it's very hard for me to just not to feel like I have to sugarcoat something, or I have to like hide behind the truth, or I have to like cover something up. Like I could never just be fully honest with people. Like some things in ministry are just really, really hard. And not being able to talk to people about that was really, really hard and really lonely.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some hard things.
And so what were the events that led to each of you having to leave or choosing to leave? Or
This is the part that I'm going to hate.
Well, let us go first then.
Okay.
Well, I feel like I already...
Well, you go first, Jessica.
Yeah.
Because you were in ministry.
accidentally talking. I haven't talked much about my situation.
Well, go ahead and tell yours, and then
Tell
you
us.
can talk about why you left.
So I was just a secretary for our church, for the pastor, which also the church had another business that was kind of like a church-based business that was run out of that church. And so I worked for them also a little bit too. And the church started to change. The church was on a very clear path of, I don't know, where it was headed. The pastor wanted to take it a very specific direction.
He wanted to change a lot of things.
Yeah, which I'm not against. Changing things is fine. But the things that he wanted to change, or the path that he wanted to go, I wasn't sure that I agreed with. And so eventually my husband lost his job, and that gave us kind of an opening to leave. And we actually moved here to Yuma after that, because we had considered moving here in the past and were actually counseled by that pastor to not do that.
Because we were on the bad list still at that point. He hated us.
Yeah, he did actually. My husband had an opportunity to get a good job here. And the pastor pulled us aside and had a meeting with us and told us that he really didn't think that we should do that and we shouldn't leave and we should stay in Yuma at that church. We were told all kinds of stuff there.
Not stay in Yuma, stay in Fresno.
That's what I meant. Yeah, to stay there in Fresno. So eventually my husband lost his job, and so we kind of saw that as an opening to come here. And so he got a job here and we moved here. And that was like 12 years ago.
That's a nice, easy out.
It
just
was
kinda
convenient.
slip on
Yeah,
in.
and it really was convenient timing, because that was at a point where the church was very clearly, it was merging with another church. Things were really weird. I worked in the office, so I saw a lot of the like behind the scenes stuff that was really weird, and I had questions weren't welcome. And so it was really convenient timing for us. And after we did leave, after we made the decision to leave, the pastor actually told me that you're just leaving because your husband made this decision and he's just immature and you guys are going to regret it and you're going to wish you had never left. And
Well, you can't make the decision as the woman,
Right.
so
and so after we did leave and saw everything that happened afterward, and even what people said to us, we were very glad we left. We did not regret that decision. So that's why we left. Why did you guys leave?
Yeah, I'm not going next. Or at all, maybe.
I feel like I kind of already shared though. Well, actually, okay, so after everything blew up at the church, Nick, just a couple months later, took over as pastor. Regret number one. And when he took over, he and I both started experiencing, that's when I was having all the panic attacks,
You can
crazy
hear about all
again.
that on our anxiety episode.
Yeah. And going through all of that. And then Nick started having some health problems, like chest pains, having to see a cardiologist, just a lot of stress-induced health problems. And we were pretty much like hanging on by a thread, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. Like it was so exhausting on us at that point, because we had already for several years, probably like 3 or 4 years, we're questioning, is this the church we want to be in? Is this what we want to be doing? And then to have all of that just kind of like thrown in our faces and then have to deal with all of that, it was just a lot. So Nick finally got to a point where he just said, I can't do this anymore. I need to worry about myself. I need to get healthy myself before I can help anybody. And so we did. We moved probably when did we move here?
August of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why we left.
And that's all, folks. Have a great day.
That is not all.
Well, after 2020, and you and John kind of were on the same page. You guys had recognized, like you said, things that you saw as flaws within the church culture, and things that you saw that you thought could be different, more aligned with ancient biblical culture and how, God's desire for the church in a way. And our church was not that way. We were very typical IFB, Independent Fundamental Baptist Church, with a lot of very typical expectations. And you guys began learning and wanting to do better.
Yeah, that was the whole thing. Is we wanted to do better. I had always had I've always asked a lot of questions, and I've taught a ladies class here for 10 years probably, or I did in my church, and that class was very much like, here are some questions I'm asking about this, or like introducing new ideas or topics, or not even new ideas, but just here are some questions
It was
to
really
consider,
like
or
how to study the Bible.
there was a lot of that. When 2020 happened, and when we came back from that sabbatical, we had such a burden for our specific church, and I have always carried a burden for the greater American church as a whole, and it was so heavy on us that we wanted to see the church be more like Jesus, and that happened at the same time that that some new people came to our church. And it's a weird story to tell. It's there were several things happening all at once. And I think the combination of people who came in with their own baggage, religious history baggage, and church culture baggage and hang-ups, which we all have. That happened. You guys came. Mm-hmm. We were reevaluating how can we be more like Jesus and cling less to what ultimately just doesn't matter, that we're making such a huge deal. So all those things were happening. And then Nick started to get kind of a more, we started giving opportunities to Nick and when I say we, I don't mean me, because I am a girl, so I'm not allowed to have any input in these kinds of decisions, but Nick was doing more in the pulpit, and
he was part-time
staff.
Nick
was part-time staff at the church.
Eventually, after you guys had been here for a long time. And then other newer people who were threatened by that. And so then whenever you're threatened, your insecurities come out. And so there were insecurities that came into play. And then there were feelings that like he was pushing people out, or like he came in to restructure or whatever. Anyway, that all was happening behind the scenes, and we didn't know it. We knew there was something. I don't know how many times John and I said to each other, there is something that's not right. Something that's happening that is not right. I don't know. It's a spirit. It's something. I don't know what. But anyway, we kind of knew, but we didn't know what. And then it all kind of came to a head. But it was after like months and months of under the surface tension building where people were having like major discussions about us and our family, things that were said, like there were crazy things.
And a lot of them were about like your class that you were teaching.
Yes.
The last women's class that you taught had a lot to do with, well, it was about Genesis and just different ways to view the book of Genesis and the Bible as a whole, and just exploring like, this is how these people view it. This is how this culture views it, or this is what was happening when it was written, and just presenting a lot of information that was really different from what the IFB culture typically teaches. And that was a big point of contention with a lot of people.
Yes.
Apparently.
Well, it made people nervous, which actually was a little surprising to me because my class has been with me for, I don't know how many, 10 years. And I've always asked hard questions or presented information to consider, that some people, that have made some people uncomfortable. And so I think what happened was I had a level of trust in the people who were coming to my class that we could take this step and it would be okay. And by the way, when I say take this step, I wasn't saying this, I believe this and you're wrong about this and this is what you've been taught wrong forever. I'm just saying like, here are some ways to consider, some things to consider along with what we already may hold to be true that maybe you haven't considered before. That was what the class was. And, I think looking back, I probably had, I hate even saying this, but I think I had too much trust that I could carry them with me in these questions that I was asking and things that I was considering, that I could carry them with me into that. So then like little rumors started flying around, you know, and then it became bigger and bigger. And then coupled with some people who were working out of insecurity and their own religious baggage, working with all of that, then the craziest things started being said about us and my kids and my class and John, your husband, my brother-in-law, like these things were so crazy. And then we're looking back, realizing there were actual conversations that had been set up, that had taken place on purpose to manipulate us into saying things. You know, like we would talk with each other and I would say something to you just, and you'd feel, and I'd feel safe saying something to you, even something I don't necessarily believe, but like something, hey, I'm throwing this out there. What do you think? We found out that there had been conversations that were set up to trap us into saying things like that, to trap John, to trap Eric, to trap me, and all of this was behind the scenes being used against us. And now it wasn't just this tiny group of people. Now it was spreading farther out. And now people that, if you had asked me a year ago, who would be in your corner? Oh man, this is where I'm going to start to cry.
Alexis says it's okay. The tears have arrived.
If you had asked me a year ago, who could you say for sure they would be in your corner? They would not believe it if somebody started telling lies about you. I would have had a good sized list from the people in that church.
Well, list got real short, real fast.
There was nobody on the list at the end. And that was the hardest thing, to see people who knew us, who know us, who know our character. We've married their kids. We've done marriage counseling with them. We've walked with them through death and financial crises. And they've watched our kids grow up. And to see at the end, those people...
You have to put it back in the middle. She put it on the floor.
Sorry. That was the hardest thing, because what eventually happened is that John called a meeting and was like, look, we had a deacon resigned. And his reason for resigning was that he had lost faith in the leadership. Well, that's John. And by default, me.
But he had several conversations with John.
He had, and they went great. And afterward, he said, I'm so glad I came to talk to you. I knew if I just talked to you, then I would realize that what this other stuff that's being said is not true. anyway, it didn't matter. He ended up resigning, said he lost faith in leadership. Well, John said, well, that's weird. So I want a meeting with all of the deacons and the staff and their wives. We all need to come together, and we need to see if this is more widespread. Also, a couple things that happened. There was another group chat happening with the deacons and staff outside of a group chat with John, and John accidentally got texted some messages that were supposed to go to this other group chat that was happening. Anyway, so we had a meeting and John just said, look, if you've lost faith in the leadership, I want to know why. Before anything else could be said, somebody stood up, read a pre-written letter that had already been passed around to everybody else in the room except Jessica and her husband. And the letter stated so many things that were not true about us. Basically that person said, I resign also. And then there was a lot of yelling and name calling from those people. Nobody else said anything during that. It was just them yelling, screaming at me, slamming doors, and then walking out. So then at that point, you're just kind of left in shock, like, what just happened here? And so then I'd never been a part of anything like that in my entire life. I don't know if I've ever been yelled at in my entire life. I don't think I have, actually. That's just occurring to me right this minute. But and called names like that. And anyway, so we were just sitting there in shock, fully expecting the rest of the room to be just as in shock as we were. And then another shock came when they were all fine with what just happened.
Not fine, but one of them actually said,
I agree.
I agree with everything this person just said.
Yeah.
Which was just kind of another.
I don't even have words to explain that scenario. It was surreal. It was like it wasn't real. And there was so much vitriol that it was so obvious that this had all been happening under the surface for so long. And the thing when we said, if there was a problem, why wouldn't you ever come? Why wouldn't you come ask us? There were things that we can't come to you. You're a narcissist. We can't talk to you about these things. You laugh when people, ask you questions. It just like the craziest things. I'm sitting here in this room with these people, like, you know us. You've been with us for I don't know how many years you've been with us, and just to realize all this happening and just be so devastated and hurt, but also like, well, now we know, like, relief. Not we knew there was something happening, now we know what was happening, but and I don't have to go in the details of what happened in that room, but there was so much hateful, it was such a revelation.
It was so bad that it was a long meeting. It was
several hours.
I was there because my husband was the deacon. And for the first hour and a half, you weren't even allowed to talk. If you tried to step in and make a comment or say anything, people actually held their hand in her face. It happened more than once. So that she couldn't talk or so that nobody had to listen to what she had to say. It was pretty bad.
I just kept thinking, how could you get to a point where you where you could hate me this much? I hate crying so much.
They're stress tears. It's your body relieving stress.
And then also, how could you pretend so well to be something else?
I mean, two of those people, I would say every one of them. Some of them I had talked to a few hours earlier. One that stood there and yelled things at you, I had talked to them about my kids and hot air balloons. And they knew what was going to happen a few hours later. One of them I had spent several hours with earlier that week, and they knew, they had seen the letter already of what was going to happen and had many, many conversations with somebody else. They knew what was going to happen. They knew we were excluded. How do you do that?
I don't know. It was so shocking and weird and not real. Anyway, in the initial letter that the first person read, they called for John to resign and then said that they were going to retain their membership because if John didn't resign, they wanted to make sure they would be in the group of people who could vote him out. And then they also proceeded to explain why anybody who would be on our side wouldn't be allowed to vote. So, and the rest and everybody in that room agreed that John should resign at the beginning. Those people left. It was horrible for about an hour. And then, and John was allowed to say very little during that time, but he talked a little bit. And then eventually I was allowed to speak. And then we were able to talk through things, which is amazing how that works when you're actually able to have conversation, how you can actually work through things and get to what's actually true instead of all this that had been created in these people's minds that they had believed. And then everybody in the room was saying, please don't resign. We want you to stay. We don't want you to leave. Please stay here. Well, at that point, you can imagine, I was like, how could we possibly stay?
And it was during that time that I said, I'm done.
Yeah,
and I said, I'm resigning my membership. I won't be back here. And it wasn't in anger or like heated emotion. It was a very calm point in the conversation. But the whole thing had just made things very clear to me that the culture, that church culture, feeds things like that. It feeds spirits. It feeds perspectives. And to see those people there, these were kids that taught my kids.
She has one.
I just can't talk if I'm going to cry. So it was just clear for me that I was done with all of that. And so I said that I wouldn't be back anymore. And I told you guys, you and John, that no matter what happened, even if everybody in there changed their minds about you, that I think that it was time for you guys to go too. The damage had been done.
Did you say that in the meeting?
She did. I could not have made it through that meeting without Jessica being there. I couldn't have done it.
It's the only time my heart monitor thing, like, it gives you the alert.
Your heart rate is too high.
Times. It's the only time that's ever happened. But yeah, I told you guys, I said what happened there was wrong. Everybody there knew it, and everybody there was a part of it, except for us, because we were purposefully excluded. So I told you guys right then and there that you need to get out.
At that meeting, John, because he doesn't do anything quickly, which is great, a good thing, but he said, I can't. I'm not going to respond right now one way or the other. Like 4 hours ago, you were screaming at us, yelling at my wife, putting your hand in her face, accusing us of all kinds of things. And now you're saying you want us to stay. I can't do anything about this right now. So I need a few days. But we walked out of that room knowing there's no way. That it was like a final revelation of all these things that we wanted so desperately to not be true of our church in this culture was like, you cannot avoid it. Mm-hmm. When you are in it, you can't, I don't even know how to word it, but it was just like the futility of all of it. It just seems so like
you can't turn a sinking ship around.
No, you just have to get out.
Mm-hmm. You just have to jump ship.
Yeah. And I hated that. Mm-hmm. And still at that minute, I didn't know. I thought, surely this group of people has shocked me, but surely the list of other people that I would have in my head who could not believe that this happened would say, there's no way this is true. Those people will, for sure. But it turned out that all those people knew also what was going to happen. They knew about everything happening behind the scenes. They had also been one way to our faces and another way behind our backs. Now, having said that, I will say this. When John resigned the church the next Sunday, which he did, we left immediately. There's no way I was going to stay. Nobody knew on Sunday. Well, actually, way more people knew than we thought would know, because so many people had been talking about it beforehand. But there were genuinely a good number of people who were shocked. And so we did have like an open house, like hey, look, if you do want to stop by, we realize this is so abrupt and it's not fair to a lot of people in this room, that what is happening right now is not fair to you. And we explained everything that had happened to the church that Sunday morning. So if you do want to see us or ask questions or just say goodbye or whatever, come, to this house at this time or whatever. And I think 150 people probably came that night. But the people that I would have told you they will for sure be there, I've not one single time heard from them since that day. And that has been so revealing. It's been revealing to actually watch everything play out since then too, and to realize like how many people knew about everything so far back, and then to watch now the dynamic. And of course we're watching from afar, like very far. Like I don't have any direct contact. Nobody talks to me from there. So I don't have any direct contact, but we live in a small town. So you're going to hear things and you're going to know things or whatever. And to see all that play out, and to see the church be so accepting of an angry, jealous, insecure, bitter kind of a spirit, but be so willing to, dismiss us from their lives forever, has been shocking, but also not shocking. So anyway, that meant leaving where we lived, because we lived in a house that belonged to the church, and it's meant all kinds of things for us now. There have been all kinds of crazy things said about us that people believe, and part of healing is letting go of I can't do anything about what people assume to be true about me. I can't do anything about that. And that's like a daily letting go, especially for this specific situation. And because of John, because of his last name, there are people around the world who are thinking things about us and assuming things about us through all of this. And that's tough, of course. But John and I haven't for one single second regretted leaving. That day, and the days following have been such a revelation to us, that we're so grateful to have. I've said this before, but the amount of grief you can hold with the same amount of relief is so confusing and very human, I guess, to hold both of those things at the same time in equal amounts. And they're kind of like this and this and this and this. And sometimes the grief is just like not even like, you don't know how you're going to get through it. But then the relief comes in and is like, there's so many things to be grateful for. Anyway, that's my story at the end.
And it has been, you kind of already said it, but so, interesting to see the people that, again, so easily dismissed everybody. Yeah. But not that, but the people that didn't. Yeah. And not very many within the church, but outside the church, as we've told the story before, in small situations. The people that have reached out or been through similar situations, it's been very revealing just to see who is so willing to toss you aside and who is right there Sorry. When the tears come, I just can't.
No words, tears, or words, one or the other. You can't have both.
I think it just adds to the level of grief that you experience because you realize the people in your life who are actually there for you.
And who are not.
And in situations like this, it is a very, very small amount of people.
And not the people you think.
Mm-mm.
Which has been so weird. It's like the people who have reached out, by hearing, and I have not ever talked about this publicly, but you have a couple times. But the people who have reached out, it's shocking, actually.
And it also shows how much this church culture hurts other people.
Mm-hmm.
Like full disclosure, and I don't mind saying this, but that same church that we all left, they have, as far as we know, fully embraced the people that very intentionally hurt us. And there hasn't been any effort by anybody to say, there's been zero apology from anybody. Yeah. People that definitely, you owe people an apology. And I know some of you are going to watch this because you're nosy. That's how you got into this mess in the first place. You owe people an apology. That's wrong what you all did. That's all.
It's true.
But it is just the culture. And so there are also people watching or listening that are in probably a similar culture and have some questions, have seen some tiny red flags, you've seen some smoke. That's all valid.
Yeah.
And if you need somebody else to say that, then here we are. Those concerns, they're valid and they don't go away because the culture is what it is.
And if somebody is dismissing those concerns, that is another huge red flag.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
The next question is, what is the path forward? or what are lessons that you've learned? Or what would you do differently? Maybe lots of questions. Those all sound like another whole episode.
I would have left.
What would you do differently?
I would have left 10 years earlier.
Yeah. Do you think there's any possible scenario when staying in a culture with so much toxicity can be healthy?
The only thing I can think of right now, and maybe in 10 years I would think differently, but the only thing I can think of right now is that it just solidifies the questions that I had and the flags that I saw. It just solidifies the decision that I made to leave was the right decision.
I think it's probably too early for me to answer what I would do differently. It's been 8 months. I don't think I would have left sooner. I held out hope for a long time. And I think I wouldn't change that. And not just hope for our church, but hope for the whole church, the American church specifically, because this is where I'm from and this is the country that I love. And I love the church. I love this country. I want the best for it. And I don't think I would have left sooner. Maybe in another few years, I'll answer this question differently. But I don't know. Maybe it's too soon for me to... Maybe something I would have encouraged John more to, when we knew there was something that wasn't right, I probably would have encouraged him more to pursue that, to get to the bottom of it. Yeah, I guess that's probably...
I would say the same from things that happen with us there. I didn't have as much insight, look as you, obviously, because we weren't on staff, but there were definitely moments of just tiny, I don't know, maybe pinpricks from the Holy Spirit of just thinking, you should ask that question of that person, or that seems weird, they seem off, maybe you should say something, and just dismissing that. I wouldn't have dismissed those as quickly. I wish I had followed through. I think that if there had been conversations at the beginning, this would have been so different. And that responsibility is not, I don't think any of us need to take responsibility for that. That's definitely on the people that had concerns. Mm-hmm. But I think if I had followed through on some of that, maybe there could have been some conversation beforehand.
Mm-hmm. So then what was the other question? What's the path forward?
Mm-hmm.
That I think I'm figuring out one day at a time. And I'm okay, I think, for now with that. I don't know what the path forward is with church. I don't know, like church in general. I don't know what the best path forward is for healing. I think, just that's a one day at a time kind of a thing.
And since then, we haven't been back in any church. That was in November of
23.
23. And this is July of 2024. We haven't rushed back. I think we know what the path forward is not.
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
It's not rushing back into another church culture. It's not rushing to heal. It's not dismissing what happened. It's not a lot of things. And I think that's an okay starting point.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for people that are like in similar situations or going through, maybe people who have been hurt and have left, or who are considering or trying to navigate a situation?
Maybe not advice. I would offer you some encouragement that you're not alone. It can feel very lonely. But this is not our circumstance is not unique to us, unfortunately. And it can feel very lonely. It can feel like you're kind of like, where do I belong? And I would just offer you some encouragement that you're not alone. I mean, if anything, the three of us are here. And you should try to find your people.
And that
Because
doesn't
they
have
do
to be
exist.
in a church.
No, you just need to find your people. And also, I think another bit of encouragement, and this is something that I have to give myself often, is that this doesn't mean that all people in all churches are bad people. I still have hope for the church, the American church. I will always carry hope for the American church. And I know, because I know people, so I know that there are good people out there in churches, and I think I would just offer you encouragement that even there's no like perfect way to get through something like this. There's just a human way, and sometimes that's not gonna. You're gonna look back and say, "I wish I would have done it differently," and that's okay too.
Yeah. I think I would just say, if you feel like you have to stay for the sake of somebody else, that's not a good enough reason to stay.
Yeah, don't stay out of obligation.
Yeah. Yeah, if you are in a similar situation, or you feel enough of a weight and you see enough red flags, you have questions that aren't getting answered, I think it's okay, for the sake of, even if it's just yourself, or the sake of your family, or the sake of your kids, it's okay to step away.
I think it's okay to trust yourself.
Yeah.
And that's something that for me was a long lesson to learn, and not necessarily learn through the situation, but just life in general.
Well, because it goes against everything that we've always been taught, is that you can't trust yourself.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So feel free to reach out.
That was a rough one. I've been dreading doing that and going back and forth about whether I actually would. I do want to reiterate that, like, I hope I stayed true to this, but this is not about somebody else. Other people are involved. They have to be, because we're all involved in each other's lives. And so I'm not telling a story about someone. I'm telling this story. And I hate that it involves other people and that they might be cast in a negative light. But the truth is the truth. And I tried to think of ways I could tell what happened without making anybody look bad or anything like that. Anyway, I don't know why I'm saying that again. It just makes me feel better, I guess. But also, like always, if you have a question or a comment, or you need somebody to just say we're here while you walk through this hard time, that's fine. If you hate us, send your emails to Katie instead.
She'll delete them promptly.
She'll delete them before we see them. And you can reach us on Instagram, Substack, YouTube, any of the places. But anyway, I think that's it.
Next
Stay
episode,
fragile.
Stay
will be
fragile.
a lot lighter.
Are we saying that? We're not
Stay
saying that.
fragile.
Stay fragile, folks. No, we're not doing Sarah's.
Stay fragile.
No, do not say it.